Okay, I think it's about time for us to get started. Thank you everyone for joining our first of what we think will be a series of webinars around various topics important to us at HS Dracones. This one is a theme that runs throughout most of what we do, and yet it is something that is not talked about enough in the business world, nor especially in the world of science and technology. So we're going to try and break down that barrier for you today and give you a couple great takeaways and insights into how empathy in particular can help you with your communication as well as your business efforts. Now, HS Dracones, or HSD, was a company that we developed to bridge the gap between communities of innovation. We're here to focus on the human element in particular, bridging language, motivations, people's needs, different environmental structures and factors all into one place. One of the other things that we talk about besides communicating and language is social capital, which is just important as is raising fiscal capital. People are necessary to help create space for your work, build hope about what it can bring, help bring communities together with maybe disparate ideas or goals or elements of what the world needs in relation to what you do. Social capital is the notion that you need to have those relationships in place so that your technology can flourish. Part of how we ended up here was that time and again we saw amazing technologies fail simply due to a lack of proper storytelling and translating the impact of the work they do into a language that other people could really understand and get behind. We're here to help bring down those barriers, bridge the gap, however you want to say it. And we're also going to be talking about this not just from a business level, but really from a human level, a personal level. That's part of where my expertise comes in. Is I'm a sociolinguist, specifically an interactional sociolinguist. So what I do is examine the way people use language and how the language they use it represents who they are, what they need, what they care about, and where they fall within the context of other people in the world. That is critical information for being able to relate to people with empathy, with foresight, and with what you need to do to be able to engage with them on the right level. And that is all about how you make those relationships for social capital. So just a little housekeeping. We have until 3. Like I said, we may not take that whole time, but we'll have opportunity for questions. I'm happy to take them throughout the presentation. Please put them into the chat as you come up with them. If something I'm saying doesn't make sense, if you need me to slow down, repeat something, that's what the chat is there for. And just like everything that happens with all of our clients, people of a certain expertise can get used to saying things automatically and presuming other people understand them. So if I'm doing that, please let me know. Without further ado, we will get started. So what do we mean when we say empathy? I think the word empathy brings up a lot of connotations for a lot of people, specifically this notion of feelings, sitting around in a kumbaya circle, being squishy, soft skills. Soft skills is a term that I really struggle with because it is my belief that it minimizes how important the skills of human interaction, of communication, storytelling, and writing are to really every field, but especially the fields of technology, science, engineering. We're not here to talk about how to talk about feelings. We're here to talk about something much more critical and I think much more useful in the world of business. Not that talking about feelings isn't important from a personal stance. We're here to talk about how you can understand people from a logical point of view. Many of our clients are engineers and scientists who understand systems and can make amazing connections between things that I just, as a non-expert in that area, wouldn't be able to do. They can follow processes and grasp concepts at very high levels to create patterns and tell stories in that way. We're doing the same thing by looking at what might seem like the chaotic world of people and finding systems, patterns, and places where you can kind of decode that world and then replicate and iterate. That is what empathy means. Empathetic communication is about finding out what is going on with another person and then creating a system that you can use to respond to what they are experiencing, what they need, and really who they are. And it's not as scary as it sounds. So when we start with thinking about building a relationship with person, right? This might be a business relationship or any kind of relationship, but people work with, people engage with the people for a number of reasons. And oftentimes it boils down to a couple key things. First of all, they engage with people they trust. Trust is something that's been coming up a lot today, but I think since the dawn of time, it has been an invaluable piece of what business relationships need, right? From there, they work with people who they like. You want to engage with someone who you feel good about engaging with. And that's another thing that's been coming up a lot in today's society. For instance, philanthropic businesses. So businesses like Tom's Shoes or Patagonia, who have a mission behind them that is about something more meaningful than simply building a business and making a profit. People engage with that because they like doing that and they like getting behind something that makes them feel good. Last, people want to work with someone who they respect. And that might be the most critical one. You don't necessarily need to make every purchase because it's doing a world of good for someone else. You do need to respect that person and what it is that they have to offer. You're not going to invest your time or your money in something that you don't think is valuable and worthwhile. But all of these three are incredibly and inextricably linked. And they are linked through the world of empathetic communication. That is because when you are engaging with someone on an empathetic level, you are doing so in a way that builds trust because you are approaching them at a personal level, a person-to-person relationship level. That also means that you're probably going to have a much more productive and therefore enjoyable interaction. They will enjoy being with you. And then finally, the whole premise of empathy is that you elevate the other person's experience, perspective, and knowledge to something that is just as important to you as it is to them, which is the sign of utmost respect. I think one of the things that people may often struggle with when we talk to them about this is that middle one around having to work with someone that they like. If you are, quote unquote, a flaming introvert, right, it might seem daunting for me to tell you, you need to find a way for people to like you. But that's not at all what I'm saying here. It's more fundamental than that. Mark just chimed in with that great question. Do I have to make people like me? What if we are very different people? No, the question is more simple about that. Oh, and we have another question. What about someone who you need to have a relationship with but don't fall into one of those three? If you need a relationship with someone and you don't trust or like or respect them, that is definitely a very precarious situation to be in. I think you might be talking about something that's at a more structural or organizational level, and you're going to need to find a way, I think, to get there, at least in some semblance of the term. And we have had folks that we've worked with who have skirted those areas. The other thing to think about is right now, you're not necessarily thinking about how you feel about that person. You're more thinking about how to make that other person feel those things about you so that they will want to engage with you. Certainly, I would hope that everyone that you engage with on a business level is someone who you can fundamentally trust and respect. Liking people is the tricky one, right? But that one also is more about feeling like a person is easy to do business with, or that you can do business with. Again, here, you can't control how other people feel. You can't control their perceptions. You can only control your productions. So if you are producing language in a way that is going to hit these 3 areas, that is going to be the way to build that relationship. Whether or not that relationship is sustainable will depend on a number of other things beyond that, but it really can't begin unless that person is able to capture that area. I also, to your point about meeting someone, that is an area where we also work with our clients to think about creative solutions. There are probably some assumptions that you're making there around what you need, and we can talk about what that means. Any other questions on that front? Right. I'm also cognizant of the fact that there is a bit of a delay between when I do something in my PowerPoint and when it shows up for you guys. So I'm going to try and make sure I slow down enough so that you can catch up. When it comes to empathy, there's a question there around why, right? That's, again, to that point around, it doesn't sound like something that you probably would learn in school as an MBA. But there are a lot of business reasons to do this. The slide we talked about before was about reasoning around a human level, an interactional level, an individual level. Now we're talking about, as a business person, why would you want to spend time talking about empathy? First of all, it differentiates you from your competition. When you are a person who is able to engage with someone on a human level, on the needs that they have in terms of their own goals, their needs, their desires, and their particular perspective, it sets you apart from other people who engage with them more on a, this is what I need, or this is what I can do for you, as opposed to, this is how I understand you, this is how I think I can help you. It's amazing how simple that small nuance in words can change a business relationship. Furthermore, it maximizes your efficiency. When you are engaging with someone around exactly what they're looking for as a business, as a person, and you're cutting through all of those presumptions, what you're able to do is get things right the first time. There, I am sure, are many of us out there who have had those hard-won relationships, the ones where you feel like you have to repeat yourself, or it takes you 5 meetings to get to a place where you really thought you could get there in 1. I would ask you to look back at those relationships and think, was I being empathetic throughout that? And we're going to talk about specific tactics around what that looks like and how you can tell if you were being empathetic. But this will help you make sure that you get it right the first time and that those conversations move more quickly. Finally, empathy helps you open the door to understanding. If you understand what a person needs and what they want, what they value, and where they're coming from, then you're much more able to engage with them. It also will make it easier for you to continue a relationship with them, again, that is beneficial to both, but that is also without some of the legwork that it can take if you're working from very different perspectives and beliefs. All of that leads to more productive relationships, more increased profit, if that's what you're going for, revenue, winning more proposals, and allowing you to do more of your work in less time. So this is our photo that we had here about empathy. And while I don't necessarily know what all of these different signs and symbols mean, I think it is an apt representation of what we're talking about here, once I add in a couple different things. So, we got a question here from Mark. What if you're talking about your company and not yourself? Can it help with that type of differentiation? We have a hard time getting people to understand how we are different from our competition. Let me go back to a slide before I move on. That's a great question. You say we have a hard time getting people to understand how we are different from our competition. We at HSD Cronus have that problem as well. It's a universal problem. And yes, absolutely, because if you are working at things from an empathetic perspective, one of the things you're going to be considering is, what does this person think? What are the assumptions that they make about me and about my marketplace, about me and as an individual, about me and as a business, me and my other competition? If you know what that person is thinking, or if you can get to a place of understanding with that, then you will be able to speak to them from that place, as opposed to from a place of more general conversation. So the first part of that is to use that relationship, whether it's, oh, this person might think I'm crazy. Well, then you're going to have a different conversation with them than if you know they already respect your work and understand it. Or they might really respect your work, but they might not understand it. They might think they do. And you might be having to do some rejiggering of their vision and re-architecture of what they understand. That means that you're going to have to change your story a bit. But if you don't know what that person thinks about your work, then you won't be able to differentiate yourself. You're just going to have to start from ground zero and just hope that the message that you put out there, that you put out to everyone, is exactly the right one for them. And I can tell you that that's never the case, because everyone is coming from somewhere and they have their own preconceived notions of what it is that you do and what it is that you might do. So what you're trying to do is to get is essentially the problem of all communication is, I have a thought, I have an idea, I have something I need to say, and I want to take that message. That is our yellow light bulb. I want to take that message and I want to put it in this other person's brain. And it's amazing when you think about how complicated communicating is, right? You have to take that image, condense it down into words that fly through the air into somebody else's ears, and then connect in their brain, and then they have to come up with that same information. And it's very much like a game of telephone. When you think about it from that perspective, it's pretty amazing we get anything done at all. There are a lot of assumptions and connections that people have to make to be able to understand each other. There are a lot of ways that we can short circuit that. We use assumptions, we use stereotypes, we use cliches, we use analogies, all of these different ways to try and get our message across. I'm going to walk you through in this video, or not video, this slide, just one piece of how to break that down into 3 steps. The first step is you thinking about your context of your conversation. Have you created a space where this conversation can happen? This is something as simple as, well, if I'm irritable because my flight was delayed and I'm stuck at the airport, it's probably not a good time for my partner to bring up an issue that we have, right? That's not a good space for empathetic communication around that area, because I'm not in a place where I can have that conversation physically or emotionally. You have to first create a boundary around what you're trying to say that will be functional. And that can look like a bunch of different things, and we're going to talk about tactics after we walk through these more high-level stuff. After that, you have to actually have that conversation, right? You have to put the words together and engage in a dialogue. From there, you have to make sure that that dialogue includes this notion of empathy, that it is injected with not just the information you need to convey, but also an acute understanding of who you're talking to, where they're coming from, what their context is, and why you both are there in that moment together. With those 3 things together, that is how you can get a message across. It's pretty simple. It's harder in execution. It's simple in theory. It's harder in execution. but it is doable. And we do this all the time, and we do it intuitively. The work that I do as a linguist, though, is taking that intuitive work that we do, that we've been picking up on since we were very young and absorbing language through our environment, and breaking it down into systems and patterns that you can take advantage of and replicate for yourself in situations that you might not be as intuitively comfortable doing it. So, all right, let's break this down. How do we do that? How do we cut through the chaos? It's another 3 simple steps, right? You have to learn about that person. You have to identify what is going to motivate them, and then you have to figure out how to align your work with those motivators. So if we have our light bulb in the middle here, we have this grid around the edge. And I encourage you, if you're in one of these situations where you know you're going to have a conversation with someone, make a 9-box grid and start jotting these things down. It can be really helpful to try and put actual words around what you think you know about someone, because it will illuminate where your potential gaps might be. So what is this person's priorities? For instance, let's go back to, for instance, the Patagonia or the Tom's business model, right? I have an environmental product that is going to save the world. Do they have those what are these person's priorities? Is their priority to have a comfortable pair of shoes or a comfortable sweatshirt? Or is it their priority to make a philanthropic donation? What are their beliefs? Do they believe in the cause that you are putting up there? Do they have different beliefs? Do you maybe have to work within a framework of a mismatch of beliefs? What do they need? Well, if they need a coat at a great price, you maybe don't need to talk about beliefs. What power do they have? Now, so this is obviously buying power is, do they have the money? But when you're talking from a business perspective, do they have the ability to make the types of choices that you're asking them to make? Who has that power? Are you talking to the right person? If not, then you might need to change the conversation to something that is within the power of the person you're speaking with. Otherwise, you're not speaking empathetically because you're not speaking to something that they can actually act upon. What are their goals? One of the most critical things here is to think about this person as a person and not as an organization. If you start going down the road of asking these questions and you realize you're not sure, or that you have so many different things going on, you might be applying the organization's needs and goals and powers and beliefs onto the person, as opposed to actually identifying what that person needs, wants, what their goals are. Similar when you get to desires, right? The business that they work for, the organization that they work for, might desire to increase their profits, but that person might have other desires. They might want to be respected by their colleagues. That's a different type of need or desire or hope than pure monetary gain. And can you align the work you're doing with that? Okay, we've got a question. I'm working with a 76-year-old IBM sales trained guy. He meets a person and first questions are married, kids, happy, making enough money, etc. Just like you're talking about, works like a charm. Absolutely. 100%. There's a lot that goes into this. It's just purely finding out who the people are. I was on a empathy mapping workshop I think it was yesterday, with an engineering company, a large company. They're $750 million size company, and they're growing like crazy. And we were doing an empathy training specifically around an individual. We were trying to go through the entire project delivery process from the point of view of this fellow named Bill. And it was a huge hang-up for the people in the room that they kept wanting to talk about the organization, and I kept having to bring them back to the individual. The individual, at the end of the day, only has so much that they can do, but they also have so much more that they want besides what their company tells them they want. And if you can understand those nuances, you're going to be much more efficient at getting what you need. So the other thing was, it seems very intrusive to me, you have a hard time asking any of that. There are some things you can do, though. You don't necessarily have to ask them, but you can through the powers of deduction. Well, first I'm going to just put these last few slides up here. Think about what it is that a person might want. Some starter questions is another thing that you can ask. Well, first of all, you can ask them something like, well, how is business going, right? How long have you been in this role? Those types of things might be able to give you a sense of where they're coming from. How do you spend most of your time at work, right? You're asking all about work questions, but you're getting a clue into what is going on. What are the things that are keeping you up at night? Another great way to do this is to start with yourself, right? If you feel comfortable sharing that, oh, I have this big project, we're working on XYZ, or we have our budget meetings coming up in a month and that's going to take up a lot of time. What that does is creates reciprocity. There's this amazing thing that in anthropology where around gift giving, right? So, excuse me. When someone gives you a gift, you feel indebted to them. So what gift can you give them in terms of social capital, of empathetic stock, that then they will feel the need to respond with? If you want to know about their needs, tell them your needs. If you want to know about their limitations, tell them your limitations. You'll be surprised at how much people do open up. The other thing is, in terms of talking about personal things, one of the other workshops that I'll be giving later is around conversational style. So conversational style is the notion that everyone has a different way of approaching things. So our chatter here who says that seems intrusive, you might have a different, what we call a high considerateness style. That means that you wait for other people to share information rather than asking for it. Other people have what we call an assertive or assertive style. Yeah. Thank you. Feel free to get a drink. All these time on planes, it's been a lot. But one of the things I was going to say is that when you have a high assertiveness style, or high involvement styles is actually the way linguists call it, you have this feeling that by sharing information, it brings you closer together. Empathetic communication also revolves around knowing what they do in terms of what their conversational style is. Perhaps one of their values is valuing their privacy. Well, then asking them about their family maybe isn't the way to do that. So then you will reassess all of these things. Another thing that we can help with, and we do help our clients with, is finding out these these personas, without having to do the asking. In this day and age, there's a lot that you can learn about people through the internet, through the powers of deduction, through what they read, what they write. All of that can be a part of the narrative and a part of the services that we do to help our clients kind of understand the profile of their clients as they are working through this process of engaging them. One moment, please. So, I hope that helps provide some clarity there. I think that this is truly the hardest part for most people, is getting over this hump of how do I know this person and how do I translate what I know into the right words. And while we can help, we have some other solutions that we can give you right now. So here's our framework again. One of the things that you'll want to think about is the difference between giving someone information and telling them the impact of that information. This is I would say maybe the number one thing that all of our clients struggle with, is the notion that it's really hard to think that people don't really care how you did something. They just want to know what it means. I have no concept of understanding how my cell phone works or how it is able to recognize my face to unlock it. But I just know that it's nice when I don't have to bother putting in a code. So the story that Apple tells when they put that feature in is not about the engineering that went into that whole innovation. And if you're talking too much about the information and not about the impact, then really what you're doing is you're not being empathetic to what this person needs to know. It can be frustrating. It also can make a person feel like, wow, I don't understand this and I don't understand why it matters. And that can leave them feeling perhaps insecure. And you don't want to create that feeling. The other thing is knowing the difference between facts and knowledge. Facts are things that you can memorize, but you don't need to understand them. Knowledge is something that you can ingest, make your own, and repeat. And that is immensely powerful when you're trying to work with a group of people, because if you can engage one person and tell them the impact of what you're doing and give them the knowledge that they need, then they can go and tell your story for you. A lot of what happens with our clients is that they'll engage with someone who seems to really love what they do. And if I could talk to their client who they had this conversation with, they would say, yeah, I spoke with Tom. He's got this amazing product. I know I felt excited about it while he was talking to me, but now I'm trying to tell my boss that we need to have this meeting to take this to the next level. And I can't put my words around what it is that he does. And that means that Tom focused on the facts when he needed to focus on the knowledge. He needed to empower the other person he was working with to process that knowledge for themselves. So the best way to do that is through a story. Oh, and it looks like my animations didn't work here, unfortunately. But you can see here the narrative arc that we are telling you or are encouraging you to use. So one of the fun facts, another anthropological tidbit for you, is that people have a hard time neurologically in their brains discerning between something they heard about in a story and something that actually happened to them. So if you can give someone the work you do in a narrative format. You lost our audio? Has everyone lost it? Let's see. Is anyone else unable to hear me? Okay. Mark says he can still hear. I know you were on your phone. I'm going to keep going on. I hope that you engage back with us. One of the things when it comes to storytelling is that, again, if you can capture that person in a story format, you'll be able to give them that information and that knowledge in a way that they can repeat it. Well, let me see if I did it. So the first place to start is, where is the beginning? And remember, I was talking earlier about a person who may not understand what you do or may have a misunderstanding about what you do and the way it works, why it's important, any of that. If you don't know that about that person, or if you assume that they have knowledge that they don't have, then you won't be able to tell them a story that makes sense. So you want to make sure first that you understand where the beginning is. And it must be something that you can capture, that you articulate, so that you can start in a position of being aligned and on the same page. One of the best ways to do that, if you're not sure where the beginning is for that person, is to start with what is the most basic principle, and then they will be able to let you know where they're at. Then from there, once you've established your beginning, the place where you have shared knowledge, then you establish the problem. And all of this is about agreement. Everyone needs to agree that there is a problem and that it's something that needs to be addressed. It's amazing how many people will skip straight to the science or the solution before acknowledging the problem. And a lot of times, especially in the technology world, what we have found is that people who don't spend their day-to-day lives doing what you do might not know what the problem really is. They might presume that the way the world operates right now is perfect, working just fine. What that means is that they don't know that there's a problem. They can't have hope for a solution. And so you can't sell them a solution that they don't know they need. That's why you establish the problem and then you say, hey, by the way, I have a solution. My solution will do this instead of that. That's the first time you talk about where you fit into that piece of the puzzle. Once you've established the solution, then you can talk about the how, the science, what you've done to create that solution. And then you wrap it all up with that impact piece. Why does this matter? Where is it going? Why does this change the world or the lives, or how does this impact the people around you? In that way, in 5 steps, you've told a story that someone else can then repeat. They have someone who, for instance, with the iPhone example, so right now, the beginning is we all know that we have to put a code in to unlock our phone for privacy reasons. The problem is sometimes you're holding things or you get your code wrong and then you have to enter it in a million times and it gets annoying. We have a solution where you can use your face to unlock your iPhone. The science behind that does XYZ. Why does this matter? Is it means that you're able to use your phone in a lot more ad hoc and high activity situations because you don't have to stop and press the buttons. Now, of course, this is a trivial example, but in 5 sentences, we've told a story that most people will be able to repeat. And once you have the ability to repeat your story, you have the ability to spread it. Now, at the end of the day, everything that I'm saying, it still is easier in theory than it is in execution. When in doubt, you cooperate. It looks like our audio is working again. I'm so glad. We can go back at the end of this and if you want to talk more. When in doubt, you cooperate. There's a theory in linguistics called cooperative communication. And what that means is that essentially everyone is trying to get the same outcome, which is like that photo we saw before, the 2 light bulbs, mutual understanding. And if you go into a conversation expecting that the person is also trying to understand you and is trying to communicate with you, then you can troubleshoot for, well, if we're having a disconnect, but we're both trying to connect, maybe there are a couple areas where we can look and see where things are falling apart. So it boils down to these 4 rules. The rule of quality is be truthful. Are you saying quality things? Maybe you're having a disconnect because what you're saying isn't true. Or maybe that other person doesn't believe it to be true. That's where we get to empathy. Quantity. Give the required information, no more, no less. A lot of scientists, but most people who are passionate about something, have the problem of getting into the weeds, giving so much detail that it confuses the other person, or that they lose the point because they can't tell what is the most salient information. Finally, or no, not finally, we have 2 more. Relevance. Be pertinent to the discussion and appropriate for the timing. That's a hard one to put into words. I've always found it difficult to describe. But really what we're saying here is if you're making a logical leap that makes sense to you, but that the other person can't wrap their head around, if they can't see how you got from A to B, or if you went from A to C and you skipped B because you're a neuroscientist and you know exactly how all of that works and you didn't need to state out loud this particular piece of the puzzle, then they're not going to be able to follow you. Furthermore, not everything needs to be said at once. Going back to the issue of quantity, if you're talking about something that's for the end of the road, but this other person still has this other need from the beginning, or that they think they need from the beginning, then you're not going to be able to connect around what you're talking about. You'll have two conversations where one of you is talking about one thing and one of you is talking about the other. And I know we've all had that experience before, and usually what it comes down to is relevance. It's the sequence of events that the people feel that they need to have in the conversation. Finally, manner. Be clear, be orderly, avoid ambiguity and obscurity. Sometimes it's about the way you put things together. Maybe you need a visual. Maybe you need to put things into bullet points. Maybe you need to stop and ask a bunch of questions as opposed to talking the entire time. Maybe this information is better relayed in a song, like preschool teachers, there's all these different ways you can communicate with people. Perhaps the way you're packaging this information isn't doing what it could. So here we have what we call our cooperative communication guide. It's a beginner's guide so that you can essentially fake it till you make it. And at the end of the session, Kelly will send you an email with a PDF version. It might be today, it might be tomorrow, of our guide. It's a decision tree that walks you through the questions of quality, quantity, relevance, and manner, and helps you dissect if your conversation is failing in any of these areas, and helps you understand how to perhaps correct that and bring that back on course. So that is where we end. We have 14 minutes left, and I know that we might have lost one of our viewers back in the storytelling, but we can also open it up to questions here. If anyone has something they'd like to ask, they want to have a slide they want me to go back to, or something altogether new that we haven't discussed that you were hoping to hear out of this webinar, that's what this time is for. We hope you enjoyed this webinar, and we thank you so much for watching. You can get your free download of the Cooperative Communication Guide by filling out the form on the webpage where you found this video. You can also use that form to reach out to us if you want to learn more about how we can help you capitalize on what you've learned here today. We look forward to hearing from you.